We understand the reason why the State Department decided not to have Ambassador Sondland appear today. I mean, it's based on the unfair and partisan process that Mr. Schiff has been running. When you think about what the Democrats are trying to do, impeach the President of the United States 13 months prior to an election based on an anonymous whistleblower with no firsthand knowledge who has a bias against the President. And the guy running the process, Chairman Schiff, didn't even tell us that he had met with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower filing the complaint.
He lied about the Russia investigation, that he had more than circumstantial evidence. He lied about meeting with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower's ultimate writing of their complaint. And we would like to unpack the last set of Schiff lies regarding the Volker testimony before we go to the next set of Schiff lies on Sondland or any further witnesses.
And frankly, this is a pattern with Mr. Schiff. He did the same thing, if you remember, the first big hearing the Democrats did this Congress, Michael Cohen. He didn't tell us that his staff had met with Mr. Cohen 4 hours prior to Mr. Cohen testifying. He didn't tell us that last summer he had met with Mr. Simpson out in Colorado, palling around with the guy with Fusion GPS. So this is a pattern. Like I said, we were hoping to hear from the ambassador today, but we understand exactly why the administration, exactly why the State Department has chosen to say, look, if it's going to be this kind of process, if you're going to selectively leak text messages, 67 pages of text messages we had, they take a handful and release to all of you, and not give the full context and not release the transcript, we understand why they made this decision at this moment.
Why? Because Ambassador Volker was not giving them the answers that they were leading Ambassador Volker to conclude.
Adam Schiff didn't tell us the way he treated Ambassador Sondland last week in this, Ambassador Volker in this interview last week. That treatment is the reason why the administration and the State Department said we're not going to subject Ambassador Sondland to the same treatment. When you're going to have a chairman release certain parts of what was said in a closed-door interview and not release the entire transcript and give it context, you can see why they didn't want to subject Ambassador Sondland to the same kind of treatment. Well, why not release the transcript so you can all see what Ambassador Volker told us? There is no wrongdoing. He was completely as clear as could be, no quid pro quo whatsoever. The two guys on the call, no quid pro quo whatsoever. Democrat chairman, after they read the transcript, said no quid pro quo whatsoever. But Adam Schiff doesn't want that information out there. So he's holding up the transcript, and he continues to have this bias against the president, the way he runs things.
Why? Because Ambassador Volker was not giving them the answers that they were leading Ambassador Volker to conclude. I do believe that we'll actually get to hear from the ambassador, but we'll only get to hear from him when there is a fair process. This is not a fair process. I can tell you, we spent more time in the skiff last time with Ambassador Volker than Adam Schiff did. You know, he came out here, you may have noticed that, he came out here all to the press, and what did he do? He gave this benign thing and then raced off to a fundraiser. So here's what we have to understand, is this has to be a fair process. And when you have a press release being drafted by our Democrat colleagues, cherry-picking text messages, when the full text of Ambassador Volker's testimony last week would have exonerated this president, let's release it. I'm all for bringing the ambassador in, but let's only do so after we release the full.
Does he have any concern?
We would sure like to see the Volker testimony released before we continue the depositions and transcribed interviews. And what we see in this impeachment is a kangaroo court, and Chairman Schiff is acting like a malicious Captain Kangaroo. He lied about the Russia investigation, that he had more than circumstantial evidence. He lied about meeting with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower's ultimate writing of their complaint. And we would like to unpack the last set of Schiff lies regarding the Volker testimony before we go to the next set of Schiff lies on Sondland or any further witnesses.
Is there a single journalist here that doesn't want to see the full transcript of Ambassador Volker's testimony? I agree, and the American people agree with every one of you. Let them judge for themselves. That's what we need to do.
There's an argument. No, hold on a second. There's an argument in favor of cherry-picking selective releases of texts. There's an argument in favor of only telling the American public what is best in the interests of wanting to take down a sitting president. Maybe you should ask what was said inside of Volker's deposition during his transcribed interview with regards to Adam Schiff's fairy tale quid pro quo charge that aid from the United States to Ukraine was being linked to an investigation into the Bidens. Why don't you ask, what did Ambassador Volker say about that? That's a great question. I'm glad that you asked that question. And I'll tell you the reason why that question was so important for you to ask is for many things, because he was in this room for several hours. And during several hours of testimony, he talked about how President Zelensky had no idea that there was a hold on aid at the time of the July 25th call. Ambassador Volker testified about how the readouts of the phone call that was made to him, that there was nothing in the readouts about there being a hold on U.S. aid or a quid pro quo. Or Ambassador Volker testified, this is what the transcribed interview would tell you if you asked this question. I'm glad that we're having this discussion. The next day, Ambassador Volker meets with President Zelensky. And in that meeting, there is no reference to a quid pro quo or President Zelensky having any idea that there was a hold on aid. Or over the course of Ambassador Volker's next several weeks engaging with Ukraine. Ukraine makes no reference to there being a hold on aid or there being a quid pro quo. And by the way, you know what else Ambassador Volker testified to? This entire time, the aid was getting released. It was going to get released. And guess what happened? The aid got released. And you know what didn't have to happen? There was no new investigation that had to get created. This whole thing is a fairy tale. Adam Schiff is misleading you, and you're playing along with it. Many of you are, and the American public is then getting deceived. When Adam Schiff said, for example, that President Trump was asking President Zelensky to manufacture dirt on the Bidens, you know what Ambassador Volker testified to? That was absolutely untrue. Now that's what we would call an inconvenient fact for the narrative. You know what else Adam Schiff has been saying to you and the American public that was not true? That he had no contact with the whistleblower. He'd like to, but he didn't have any contact. He lied. You know what else he lied about? When he gave his opening statement from the acting director of national intelligence as to what was in front of the world as far as what the transcribed interview said. Now going back to Ambassador Volker's transcribed interview and a process, we were here ready to do our part. If anyone is going to testify behind those closed doors, we're going to make sure that we're there to ensure that the other 99% of the story is being told. Because guess what? If we weren't there last Thursday, you would have no idea of everything that Ambassador Volker said to obliterate Adam Schiff's fairy tale quid pro quo charge. You would have no idea. So we're here. Now, as far as the administration goes, if they don't want to send Ambassador Sondland here, because this is a kangaroo court, because there has not been a vote to launch an impeachment inquiry, because the minority does not have any rights for subpoenas, because the president doesn't have the right to have counsel present to ask questions, for subpoena power, to present evidence. This entire thing is a political charade, is a clown show. We're here, we're ready for whoever's going to be testifying in the other room, but we have to be here because if we're not, Adam Schiff sure as heck is not going to tell you, because all he has to do is right now release that transcribed interview, because he won't, because it destroys his narrative. It undercuts it, it blows it up. And by the way, Jerry Connolly comes on to, Aaron Burnett's show on CNN at 7 o'clock on Thursday, and they have a back and forth. They play a clip from Jim Jordan, they play a clip from me, where they're basically saying, Jerry Connolly, you didn't hear anything of what Jim Jordan and Lee Zeldin says that they heard, right? And they have this back and forth, basically dumbing down their audience. And what isn't pointed out in that back and forth is that Jerry Connolly was the last person to show up. He's the first one to leave instantly. He wasn't there for any of it. So what's important is that we're here, and we can answer any question you want as far as what Ambassador Volker testified to, credibly, exceptionally, professionally, but you're not asking any of the most important questions. Some of you are, but many of you aren't asking the most important questions, such as, what did you hear last Thursday that we don't yet know about? Adam Schiff won't answer, but he should. He should release the transcript.
President, The White House has repeatedly refused to hand over documents. Now the administration is blocking a key interview. Doesn't that imply that there's something they're trying to hide?
No, it implies exactly what Mr. Zeldin just said.
It's fairness.
Exactly what I don't think anyone could say it better than Lee just said it. That's the focus.
Talking about kangaroo court, you know what else Jim Jordan pointed out when we were here a few days ago? Was how when we showed up on Thursday, Adam Schiff started by the ground rules was that this was going to be a staff-led transcribed interview. And then it wasn't until Jim Jordan pushed back that Adam Schiff reluctantly said that he would allow members to ask questions. But it was discouraged. He was strongly discouraging members to ask questions. And by the way,
until it went so bad for Adam Schiff that he jumped in for 25 minutes and voices cracking when they start to look at this. Why? Because Ambassador Volker was not giving them the answers that they were leading Ambassador Volker to conclude. I can tell you that this is nothing more than, Adam Schiff talked about 4 acts. You know what? There are 4 acts. And the first, second, third, and fourth act already has reached a conclusion for Adam Schiff. Let the American people decide what the final act will be, because ultimately, when the truth comes out, you will see that this president did not hold aid to try to influence a foreign country to do anything.
one last thing. One other thing that's really important to point out is that another show put up on Sunday, one of the texts from Bill Taylor. That show then did not follow that text with the response that absolutely says unequivocally that there is no quid pro quo. Furthermore, what that show did not say after that is the context from Ambassador Volker's transcript with regards to Bill Taylor's text. And you would then know if we all had the transcribed interview in front of us, but we'll tell you now, it's been out there in the public. He said it because he read a Politico story. And he wanted to get the aid to Ukraine released. He saw a Politico story and he was concerned, and then he was corrected. But why is it that the coverage is only going to show Bill Taylor's text and not show the response correcting it and not provide any context whatsoever?
Why? Because Ambassador Volker was not giving them the answers that they were leading Ambassador Volker to conclude.
You know why I'm pissed as I stand here? Because right now, this Congress, our country, all across the entire country, there are people watching this who are disgusted with how 2019 has gone. That all of their priorities right now, why are we not working together to pass USMCA next week? We know that it'll grow jobs, increase investment in the United States, that it would increase GDP. Why are we not talking about USMCA? Why aren't we working on a bipartisan basis to lower prescription drug costs? Why are we not working together on a bipartisan process in order to pass all of these different priorities that are really important to our constituents, Republicans and Democrats, conservatives, liberals? It's all to appease an enraged liberal activist base, insisting on resisting, impeaching, opposing, and obstructing everything and anything. We are all, as a country, being held hostage by a few members of Congress who have leveraged congressional primaries against Democratic leadership and committee chairs. They've instilled fear on the part of their colleagues in their own conference. And them and their activist base is preventing us from standing here for all of us to be able to spend 100% of our energy working together in order to pass bipartisan important priorities for our country. So if we sound like we're pissed as we stand here, it's because we are. The American people are getting screwed by an enraged liberal activist base demanding impeachment. They don't even care what the crime is. They don't care what the facts are. They don't care what the evidence is.
In the future,
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
This is, it's called a wrap-up smear.
Good morning. We were informed about an hour and a half ago that by the attorney for Ambassador Sondland that the State Department would refuse to allow him to testify today. This was after conversations well into yesterday afternoon and evening with the State Department legal advisor, in which there was no indication that the ambassador would be a no-show. Not only is the Congress being deprived of his testimony, the American people being deprived of his testimony today, but we are also aware that the ambassador has text messages or emails on a personal device which have been provided to the State Department, although we have requested those from the ambassador, and the State Department is withholding those messages as well. Those messages are also deeply relevant to this investigation and the impeachment inquiry. And I want to just explain for the public the significance of this witness and the significance of the decision, evidently by the Secretary of State and President or both, to withhold this key witness's testimony today. We know from the text messages that Ambassador Sondland was in discussion with Ukrainian counterparts, with fellow diplomatic personnel, and the President, as well as at least one U.S. Senator, about the course of events that we are investigating.
That's what I'm talking about.
We know from those text messages that diplomatic personnel raised a concern with him that military assistance was being withheld to secure help from Ukraine in the president's re-election campaign. We know that Ambassador Sondland had at least one discussion with a fellow diplomat on that very subject of why military assistance was being withheld. We know Ambassador Sondland was a key player in efforts to obtain a commitment from Ukraine to investigate a bogus conspiracy theory about the 2016 election, as well as Joe Biden and his son. And we know that the ambassador has relevant evidence on whether the meeting with the president that the Ukrainians desperately sought with President Trump was being conditioned on these investigations that the president believed would help his re-election campaign. It is hard to overstate the significance of not just Ambassador Sondland's testimony and the documents, but the testimony of others as well. The failure to produce this witness, the failure to produce these documents, we consider yet additional strong evidence of obstruction of the constitutional functions of Congress, a co-equal branch of government. There are 4 issues that we are looking at least 4 issues that we are looking at, all that go to the heart of our national security. And by preventing us from hearing from this witness and obtaining these documents, the President and Secretary of State are taking actions that prevent us from getting the facts needed to protect the nation's security. We are looking into whether the President solicited foreign help in a U.S. presidential election again. We are looking into the issue of whether a meeting that Ukraine desperately sought with the President at the White House was being conditioned on the willingness of Ukraine to investigate this bogus conspiracy theory about 2016 and investigate the Bidens. We're looking at whether Ukraine was given reason to believe that military assistance it desperately needed to fight off the Russians was being withheld until it made commitments to do these political investigations for the president. And we are looking into the question of whether there has been an effort by the President, the Secretary of State, and others to cover up this misconduct. Ambassador Sondland is an important witness on each of these subjects, but he is not the only important witness. And we will consider this act today, and we've had members fly in from around the country to hear the ambassador's testimony, as well as the withholding of the ambassador's documents, as well as efforts that may be made to discourage or having the effect of discouraging other State Department witnesses from coming forward and testifying, as they have agreed to be further acts of obstruction of a co-equal branch of government. This is one of the few impeachment inquiries in the history of our country. It goes to the core of whether the president abused his office to seek political help in his re-election campaign, and did so to the detriment of our nation's security.
This is, it's called a wrap-up smear.
Did so by effectively coercing a country that has been invaded by Russia.
This is, it's called a wrap-up smear.
To investigate a rival and condition the relationship between this country and that country on whether they were willing to play ball.
This is, it's called a wrap-up smear.
That is the gravamen of the issues that we are investigating, that this impeachment inquiry is looking into. It is hard to imagine a set of facts more damaging to our national security and our standing in the world, but also more of a fundamental breach of the president's oath of office.
And then she goes on to explain what the wrap-up smear is. Let's listen to it.
And so this is, it's called a wrap-up smear. You make up something, and then you have the press write about it, and then you say everybody's writing about this charge. It's a tool of an authoritarian to just have you always be talking about what you want them to be talking about.
The American people have the right to know if the president is acting in their interests, in the nation's interests, with an eye towards our national security, and not in his narrow personal political interests. They have a right to know. Indeed, the American people have a need to know. And through this impeachment inquiry, we are determined to find the answers. Thank you.
That
was your office's first contact with the whistleblower.
Please help us. It hurts so much to know that no one is clicking me or liking me. They might have no opinion. I can't live with that.
You have the courage to speak the truth, to do what is right, and to fight for what you believe, and keep doing it.
Damn bird.